They're cutting the very agency that protects your neighborhood while giving themselves more guards in Washington. Sounds like a headline from a dystopian show, right? But it's real. That's the double standard Congressman Lou Correa just exposed in one of the most quietly explosive hearings of the year. A hearing where the man in charge of the FBI, Patel, tried to justify why public safety can somehow survive $500 million in cuts, and Correa refused to let him spin his way out. When a government says do more with less, it's never the powerful who feel the less. It's the sheriffs, the teachers, the parents who sit in high school bleachers on Friday nights and wonder what if.
For us to understand.
I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Director Patel. I want to focus a little bit on domestic terrorism. We have a graph here, data up to 2021, but as you can tell, domestic terrorism is on the rise. Nation, our citizens under threat. We saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk, 2 assassination attempts on the president, school shooting, Minnesota last month, and closer to home, just a couple of days ago, Huntington Beach, peaceful vigil for Charlie Clark, infiltrated by neo-Nazis who essentially made the local individuals attending that event fear for their safety. All of us know that a lot of these domestic attacks are by lone wolves, but yet they do leave clues, social media or elsewhere. Director Patel, you're it. You're the thin blue line. The FBI, your job to protect our citizens back home from those that would harm us. You have to find the needle in the haystack. Takes a lot of work, a lot of resources. Talking to my local sheriff this morning who said they're concerned. Federal cuts to local grants that help them do the job. Then, of course, let's not forget about other threats that are coming before us, like high-tech fraud. Local senior recently was talking to me about a text she had gotten, a demand by the IRS to send a payment immediately, or the IRS agents were on their way to arrest this individual. Pretty gutsy stuff by folks probably from Europe, North Korea, Russia, China, people, okay, going after those precious savings our senior citizens rely on. Yet the president's proposing a budget cut of $500 million or more to your organization, the FBI. You've said that that'll essentially equate to about 1,300 less jobs at the FBI. So I'm going to ask you essentially, what is it that we can do to help you do your job? Little concerned. Friday night lights. One of the events I love to do on Friday nights, go to the local high school football game. Sit there at the stadium and you always say, what if? What if? You're the thin blue line. Can you do your job cutting $500 million from your budget?
Thank you, sir. I think we are doing our job, and the distinction is with the budget that we have, we are flexing more resources to the field. California is receiving the largest FBI plus-up of any state in the union due to that plus-up. They're not getting a reduction. No state is getting a reduction. Every state is getting a plus-up. And so I'm utilizing the money that we have to first plus it up. And the empty vacancies that we have, those haven't been filled in years, not under my leadership.
Here's my concern. You're going to do well, you're doing more with less, is what you're saying. Yet we're about to vote on a budget that has $88 million more to protect members of Congress, the executive branch, and the Supreme Court. There's a contradiction here. Back on Main Street, we're saying you can do more with less, you can protect them with less money, yet here in Washington, we're saying we need more money to protect members of Congress. It's a little contradiction here, or maybe, sir, you ought to talk to leadership about coming in with your management style to protect the Supreme Court, Congress, and the administration. Otherwise, it's essentially a hypocritical situation. We need more protection, yet folks on Main Street can do with less.
My concern is folks on Main Street. We also were, I think we received over $300 million in the big beautiful bill, and we're also receiving pots of money from our interagency. So this sort of $500 million cut isn't entirely accurate.
You're still getting cut $200 million plus. You're still moving your agents to do ICE work. So you are leaving a lot of bases uncovered. And I'm not going to be argumentative with you, Director Patel. I'm just saying, if that thin blue line does not hold, people on Main Street will pay the price.
I agree with you, sir.
And I just look forward to working with you, because I am very concerned that these kinds of budget cuts are short-sighted, especially when my local sheriff calls me and says, we need more support, and we're looking at budget cuts.
I'll work with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield time.
Mr. Chairman, I have another unanimous consent request.
What if the next tragedy happens here? What if the thin blue line everyone talks about finally snaps? That was Correa's message, and it hit hard because it came from reality, not politics. He began by laying out a picture that should make anyone uncomfortable: domestic terrorism on the rise, extremist groups showing up at vigils, school shootings that keep hitting the same headlines, each one followed by promises that fade within days, scammers tricking seniors into handing over their life savings to fake IRS agents. This isn't a movie plot, it's daily life in towns across America. And the agency tasked with tracking these threats, the FBI, is being told to make it work with $500 million less. Correa looked across the hearing table and asked the simplest, most human question imaginable: can you still protect people? Patel smiled politely and launched into numbers. We're flexing resources, no state is losing funding, we're actually plus-upping California. The words sounded rehearsed, polished, safe, but the moment you peel them apart, the cracks start showing. Because flexing resources means moving people around, not adding them. It means one department gains only because another one gets stripped. Correa didn't buy it. You could hear it in his tone, calm, almost disappointed. You're saying you can do more with less, he said. But back home, they're being told to protect with less, while here in Washington we're adding $88 million more to protect ourselves. The air shifted. That one line hit like a gut punch. It wasn't partisan, it wasn't dramatic, it was just brutally honest. Think about that. While field offices are told to tighten their belts, Congress, the executive branch, and the Supreme Court are all getting a security raise, $88 million more dollars. The message couldn't be clearer. Security for them, risk for everyone else. And that's what Correa called out, not as an attack, but as a reality check. Patel tried again to soften the edges. He claimed the cuts weren't real, that there was new money coming from other bills, that agencies were pooling resources, that it all balanced out. But Correa had done his homework. You're still getting cut $200 million plus, he reminded him. You're still moving agents to do immigration work. You're still leaving field bases uncovered. Every word landed heavier than the last. Because this wasn't theory. These are real vacancies in real offices. Agents pulled from counter-terrorism units to handle immigration backlogs. Analysts leaving and not being replaced. Cybercrime divisions shrinking just as foreign hackers get smarter. And while all that's happening, Washington quietly signs off on more guards, more walls, more armored SUVs for itself. This is where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. The same leaders who go on TV promising to be tough on crime are signing budgets that hollow out the very institutions designed to fight it. It's selective safety, protection for power, not people. Correa's strength was how human he sounded through all of it. He talked about his local sheriff calling him that morning, worried about losing federal grants. He talked about a senior citizen terrified after receiving a fake text threatening arrest. He painted pictures people could see, not data points, but real fear, real vulnerability. And that's why his words hit differently. Because behind the charts and the politics, he made everyone remember what this is about. The person on the other end of the emergency call. Patel, for his part, kept insisting that things were fine. He said California was getting a plus-up, that vacancies would eventually be filled, that no state was technically losing money. But as Correa pressed, the truth came out piece by piece. Yes, there are cuts. Yes, there are reassignments. Yes, agents are being redirected away from local partnerships into federal immigration work. That's not efficiency, that's erosion. But when Kash Patel finally conceded that the cuts aren't entirely accurate, but yes, adjustments are happening, Correa just nodded. Because the point had already been made, if you have to explain your math that hard, the reality on the ground is probably worse than the numbers suggest. What makes this hearing so powerful isn't shouting or theatrics, it's how quietly Correa dismantled the narrative. He didn't need to raise his voice or drop viral one-liners. He just drew a line between two truths, one where DC walls itself off with more security, and another where local police departments are told to improvise without funding. That's how hypocrisy hides, in the fine print. The real irony, the same big beautiful bill, Kash Patel proudly referenced, the one supposedly supporting law enforcement, was the same package that funneled more cash into ICE, private detention centers, and federal surveillance programs. It beefed up political policing while draining community-based investigations. Translation: less focus on protecting citizens, more focus on controlling them. Correa exposed that trade-off without ever saying the words. Every time Kash Patel tried to redirect, he pulled it back to people. Friday Night Lights, he said, that moment in the stands when a small-town crowd feels safe because they believe someone's watching out for them. But what if? He asked quietly. That what if landed heavier than any statistic, because every viewer watching from home knows exactly what he meant, and that's where the hearing transformed. It stopped being about dollars and started being about trust. Trust that the institutions sworn to protect us aren't being sacrificed for politics. Trust that leadership still values public safety as much as personal security. Kash Patel's evasions sounded bureaucratic, but Correa's examples made them real. Each flex and plus-up translated into a missing agent, an unanswered lead, an investigation left cold. Every dollar cut from the FBI's domestic division means one less set of eyes tracking online extremists, one less team intercepting scams before they drain another senior's account, one less field office connecting the dots before the next tragedy makes the news. By the time Correa finished, the silence in that room said everything. This wasn't grandstanding, it was someone demanding accountability in the plainest possible language. If that thin blue line doesn't hold, he said, people on Main Street will pay the price. No drama, no applause. Just a statement that carried the weight of every family who's ever relied on that line. And he's right. Because law and order isn't a slogan, it's a system built on funding, manpower, and will. Cut one piece, and the whole structure starts to wobble. The irony is that while politicians tweet about defending America, the very agents defending it are being told to do more with less. That's not patriotism. That's negligence wrapped in a press release. This moment matters because it exposes the playbook. Leaders announce cuts as efficiency, frame them as budget reform, and count on the public not to notice what's being lost. But Correa noticed. He saw how easily efficiency turns into fragility, how flexing resources becomes code for stretching them thin until they snap. And he said out loud what so many people feel, that real safety doesn't come from speeches, it comes from support. What makes his exchange with Kash Patel so gripping on video is the tone. Correa never looks angry, he looks disappointed, like someone who expected better from the people in charge. And that emotion resonates because disappointment means belief. It means he still believes the FBI should be what it once was, an agency that protects, not politicizes. By the end, Kash Patel's defenses had run out. All that was left were numbers and semantics. And the image Correa left behind, a small-town football crowd, a local sheriff running out of grant money, a grandmother checking her phone in fear, lingered longer than any statistic. That's storytelling at its most powerful, because it turns policy into people, and the audience watching saw through it. They saw how selective safety works, how power builds walls for itself while telling everyone else to be brave. They saw how budget cuts become quiet acts of self-preservation for the elite. Because when you strip resources from those who keep the peace, chaos doesn't vanish, it just shifts to the places no one on Capitol Hill will ever visit. What this hearing ultimately revealed is a hierarchy of security. The higher you climb, the thicker the glass gets. But out in the neighborhoods where danger actually shows up, the glass is cracking, and no one's sending help. Correa's final words turned that image into a warning. If that thin blue line fails, it won't just be statistics that break, it'll be trust. And once trust breaks, no amount of armored cars or personal guards can fix it. So maybe that's why this clip is spreading online, not because it's dramatic, but because it's true. It cuts to the core of what people feel, that somewhere along the line safety became a privilege, not a promise. When the people in power decide their own security matters more than yours, it's not law and order anymore, it's hierarchy disguised as policy. That's why Correa's words matter. He reminded the country that safety isn't just about borders and buildings, it's about families, neighborhoods, and the quiet moments when you shouldn't have to ask what if. And if this hearing proved anything, it's that protecting power has never been the same as protecting people. One creates distance, the other creates trust, and trust once lost doesn't come back with a line item in a budget. So next time you hear someone brag about being tough on crime, ask the real question, tough for who? Because every time they cut the funding that keeps agents in the field, investigators in offices, and communities safe, they're not saving money, they're gambling with lives. This isn't about left or right, it's about the simple truth. Correa exposed hypocrisy, dressed up as efficiency, a promise of protection that only applies to the powerful. And until that changes, law and order will stay just that, a slogan, not a system. If you believe real public safety starts with protecting people, not politics, make sure this story doesn't fade. Hit that like button so more people see what's really happening behind those polished hearings. Subscribe for more deep dive breakdowns that keep power in check and the facts front and center. Because real oversight doesn't come from those in charge, it comes from you, the people paying attention.